Welcome to the BCS Policy Jam. Technology has been hitting the headlines with lively debates around whether artificial intelligence is a force for good or bad. And of course, the post office scandal has shone a light on how the computer isn't always right. In this month's Policy Jam, we look at what can be done to address the risks and the challenges of emerging technologies, and how can trust be restored so we don't end up with another miscarriage of justice, such as befell the post office staff. Senior BCS members recently compiled a report, Living with AI and Emerging Technologies, Meeting Ethical Challenges Through Professional Standards. And I'm privileged to be joined by its authors and the CEO of Whistleblowers UK. So a quick canter round now for you all to introduce yourselves. So we'll start off with Georgina, if you could introduce yourself.
Oh, good morning, Claire, and thank you so much for inviting me to BCS and also for the other speakers on the panel today. I'd like to say that I'm probably the least knowledgeable about tech itself, but I'd like to think that I know a bit about ethics. This is the 10th year of having Whistleblowers UK. It's our 10th anniversary, our birthday, and we'll be running a few more sessions like this, hopefully with you, as we go through this year. Whistleblowers UK was set up to provide help, information and support to whistleblowers, but also to campaign for legislative change, because we recognised very early on that while we could help people through a system, the system itself was failing whistleblowers. And it was really important to put together new policy and new policy ideas. And I'm very proud to say that because my team are absolutely super, our bill is back on the floor of the Commons at the moment, and we're optimistic that it will come in soon. But the reason I'm here today is very much to help promote and encourage and engage with people from the tech community who are going to play such an important part in the development of ethical whistleblowing legislation in the UK. Thank you so much, Claire.
Now over to Gillian.
Oh, hi, and thanks for having me this morning. So I have just finished my term as president of the BCS and chair of trustee board, and I'm also an integral part of the ethics team. We have a specialist group for ethics at the BCS, and so I've been delighted to be involved in the survey that we ran last year, asking our members whether they'd encountered any ethical problems in their technical work, and then the paper that was written as a result of that survey. So really looking forward to the session this morning.
And over to Bern.
Hello, my name is Bernd Stahl. I'm professor at the University of Nottingham. I've been doing research around ethics of computing for quite a few years. And clearly that has now been integrated or is part of this broader ethics of AI debate. So I've been working with BCS on ethics for quite a while, and I was one of the contributors to the survey and the paper. So I'm also very much looking forward to this conversation.
And now Adem.
Hi, I'm Adem. I'm a data engineering lead at a company called Knight Frank. I'm part of the ethics committee as well, and also a contributor to the paper. Much me.
Can I just ask those that have just joined us if you could keep your videos off for now, just while we're recording, and then if we decide to ask you a question, we'll ask you to come on. That's great. Thank you very much. So the BCS report on emerging technologies and ethics concluded for the UK to play a leading role in setting high standards in the use of AI, the following needs to happen. Every technologist working in high-stakes IT roles, in particular AI, should be a registered professional, meeting independent standards of ethical practice, accountability, and competence. Government, industry, and professional bodies should support and develop these standards together to build public trust and the expectation of good practice. UK organisations should publish policies on the ethical use of AI, and those policies should also apply to non-technical leaders, including CEOs. Technology professionals should be supported if whistleblowing when feeling asked, for instance, to act unethically or to deploy AI in a way that harms colleagues, customers, or society. Now, ideally, I should have had a little text box there on the side, but I hope you all got that. If there's any questions, please do put that in the messages. But first and foremost, the UK government should aim to take a lead in and support UK organisations to set world-leading ethical standards. But let's just take a step back first. Let's forget the hype, the robots taking all our jobs. What do you, as experts in this field, think about how these new emerging technologies are impacting society at large? And that's for good and then for bad. I'll start off first with Georgina.
Oh my goodness. Right. That's a really big question. I personally see technology as being a massive advantage. And it's certainly helping people to understand the world that we live in, to engage in things they could never have reached before. And let's use Zoom as a good example. Prior to COVID, most people had to travel vast distances, and that meant that many people were unable to engage in debates and conversations like this one. So I would say it's got some huge advantages. I think the disadvantages are when it is used around things like child pornography, people's trafficking, sanctions busting, things that anything that's good is always going to be utilised and exploited by people who are criminally inclined. That's an age-old problem. But I certainly think that we can't use that not to move forward. So personally, I'm very supportive of technology.
And so over to Gillian. What are the good things about AI? What's the bad?
Oh, well, where do you start? I work so I've got a little company and we do recruitment of women in tech, and women in tech is a big thing for me, always has been a big thing for me. But it became apparent really early on that one of the ways in which women were not selected for interview as they were being recruited was because there was a piece of technology that was scanning through CVs and understanding who were the best candidates. And because that technology looked at the output and then reworked its algorithms so that it could decide who were the best candidates, and because it found that 80% of the candidates were male, it thought that the best candidates were male. And therefore, there was this self-perpetuation of, well, we'll only select male candidates then. It's scary how intrusive this can be in the lives of the general populace, and they haven't even a clue that these technologies are being used and are not in their interest. I mean, the same applies to things like the banking and mortgage selection application algorithms that decide that you are a good candidate or a bad candidate for a loan or a mortgage based on a whole set of maybe biased ideas about you and what your capabilities to pay back the loan are. I don't think half the population understand how they are being manipulated in this way. So I think there are some really, really damaging things that we need to look at, and bias in AI is just a massive part of that.
Let's go to Bernd next. What's your view?
So picking up from Georgina's point, that there is a lot of good in technology, and that's why we use it, right? It has something to offer, and therefore it's being deployed. But the downsides are, as Georgina said, it can be misused, criminal use. And as Gillian said, there are already well-established ways of thinking about some of the disadvantages of AI, such as biases, discrimination. But I think it's worth highlighting the importance and the relevance of unintended systemic consequences. And what I'm thinking about are the things that if technology gets imported, gets used in society in the way it's intended, it may still have consequences that are unintended and that we don't want. And I think you can see loads and loads of examples of that. To take a very prominent example, look at how we use smartphones. Right? We all buy a smartphone because we think it's good. It does loads of things. It gives us, it's a telephone, but it also provides us with our diary. It communicates and all sorts of things. But it then also leads to all those problems. For example, self-harm among children, changes of body images. So all of these are things that are not intended. They're not a misuse, but they are sort of systemic side effects of the technology. And I think, to me, a key challenge is how do we understand what those are, what they're likely to be, and how can we interact with them early? How can we try to avoid them as soon as possible, as soon as we can understand what they might be?
So what about in education? It's like a double-edged sword in some ways, isn't there? There's students who are using it for research, and we did a report recently and we looked at how it can help take the grunt work, as it were, out of doing some of the research. It can help you compile research easier, possibly. What's your view on it? Because of course the other danger is you could end up just using ChatGPT to produce all your essays.
Well, that's certainly a big debate around generative AI right now. I mean, that's the technology of the day, and that's what we're worried about. And again, it's a double-edged sword, as you quite rightly said. It might help students who don't find it easy to write essays to do this in a much better way. It may be used for cheating. Well, it is certainly used for cheating by many students. But again, I think there are lots of unintended possible consequences that we don't really understand yet. So what's it going to do, for example, what is ChatGPT, generative AI, what's it going to do to research? Now, I think it might be a really useful tool for people like me to structure our ideas, to draw proposals, to write projects. But at the same time, does that, for example, then lead to the privileging of certain types of research questions? Does it sort of limit our creativity, our way of thinking about things? Does it lead to academic misconduct? So I think, again, the point is that we know some of the consequences, or we are fairly certain of what some of them are, but we don't really understand what all of them are, or what the most likely ones will be a year or 2 years from now. And I think that really needs to be a key activity of professionals to explicitly try to target and try to understand where we are going with these technologies.
Adem, give me your point of view on the good and bad of AI.
Bad. On my side, it's kind of the good side is kind of the connection with the data sets. So a lot of the stuff that we do, we're trying to join data sets together, get more information, analyze that kind of large data sets. It can be quite difficult, but with the AI side, you can ease that problem for us. The bad side is, of course, kind of working out where that is being sourced, where there's not kind of the transparency of kind of where is that data coming from, how is that data being produced. You can, and even if that data is even being with, like, for example, hallucinations, kind of just being made up. So it's trying to find that kind of ease and balance. But at the same time as well, we found quite useful within our industry kind of things, like when you're trying to do coding, there's now quite a lot of AI tools that can actually code for you or help you through your coding. So you can like review it, make sure that it's kind of correct or anything else. Again, that can be useful for kind of like an experienced coder. But for some newer coders, it can possibly give them like bad habits, or kind of, again, if they're not understanding the full script, they might think, oh, that's great, but it's not the best way of doing it. It's not the most efficient way, or it might not actually produce the answer they're looking for. So there's good and bad, I think, inside of it. But I think wholly good. It can help ease a lot of people's pressure, help automate quite a lot of processes for people, especially in the industry. But there has to be those checks and within those processes to make sure that they are doing what they should be doing, as with any technology.
So what about the idea of that was in the report about companies publishing policies on the ethical use of AI, and that they should apply to non-technical leaders, including CIOs? And a company like yours, that
Yes.
would be a good idea, I would presume, something you'd be willing to adopt.
Exactly. So at the moment, our policy, we've got we've got a couple of policies in the company, to kind of one that actually goes over AI, but then a wider one that goes over IT in general, and what we should be kind of doing in our day-to-day practice. But in terms of kind of the AI side, is our general rule is kind of don't be first, be right. Because there's no point kind of like trying to, as you've probably seen from many companies at the moment, they immediately try and throw out a new shiny tool. Look, this is what we're doing, something like that. Put an AI label on top of it. Most of the times it's not even AI, it's just probably some sort of algorithm on top of it. It's not really what you would call, or define as AI. But then at the same time, it's kind of, as soon as it comes up, it's doing something weird. Prime example is probably that the latest Google one that came up, and it was trying to do images, and it was just putting people of color in like Nazi uniforms because it was trying to diversify the images, but of course it wasn't making them accurate. So it was trying to do something good, but it wasn't actually doing what it should be doing. And without those checks, it's going to make it wrong.
So just to say, for those that have joined us online, if you want to put any questions in the chat, Dan Aldridge, our head of policy, is keenly waiting to read them out at a point to come soon, I hope. So please do put your questions in the chat and he will compile them. And if you're lucky, we might say to you, come live on the webinar and talk to us about it. So we had a pre-chat before we all decided to do the webinar. And Georgina, you were saying that you've seen quite a spike in complaints surrounding AI. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Claire. Traditionally, health and the health sector has been the largest number of inquiries at Whistleblowers UK. Now, that was then balanced around banking and other public sector, and we didn't see anything from tech. But literally in the last 6 months, at least one every week, we are seeing a huge upturn in the number of people who work in the technology sector, not just people who are developers and coders, but actually managers, raising concerns and then being crushed, or they feel that they're being crushed. And we're not just talking here, small outfits, we're talking global names. I think Frances Hanking obviously was a huge moment of awakening to the world, but we've seen people from Google, from Amazon Web Services, from Twitter, from Facebook. It just keeps going.
So what do you think should be done? I mean, what you talked earlier on about regulation. So that was one of the points that was raised in the report about having clearer channels. What are the issues at the moment with those channels?
Well, again, I think that very few people are aware of the actual legislation that's around at the moment, the Public Interest Disclosure Act, let alone what it means to them. And I think it's very difficult for people in tech, many of whom are working in alternative ways, not traditional workers. They sit outside the legislation. And it's really important for politicians to get on top of this quickly, because they certainly don't understand or don't appear to understand the risks that people are facing as a result of being in a unregulated working environment and not being protected by what I would say very weak laws anyway. So we're promoting the proposals in the whistleblowing bill to create an independent office of the whistleblower that will protect every citizen, be a safe harbour for everybody. And I'm really hoping that some of the people in the audience today will have some thoughts about how that can, how tech and technologists can feed into that development.
So again, when we were having our pre-chat, you did say that you yourself are using AI in a beneficial way, for instance, to help cut down the amount of work that your organization is doing when it comes to finding witness inconsistencies and things like that. Tell me a bit more about that.
So yes, so we have a tech focus group, and they have been educating me in the use of technology and AI and how the positive sides of it. And I'm very aware of the things that Gillian's talked about, but I think we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we are now empowering whistleblowers who are going often through this process as litigants in person without legal help to use AI to scan through often mountains of documents, 3, 4, 5 lever arch files, lots of disclosure, and identifying not only inconsistencies in witness statements, but actually where documents have been reimagined, I think is a polite way of putting it, and who's responsible for that. All of which assists somebody going through the employment tribunal. Not that I want to keep it, by the way, we'll hopefully come to that as well. But as the situation is now, that's taking out a huge amount of cost, a huge amount of time, and giving people the proof that an organisation is not treating them properly. And that's not just in tech, this is across every single sector. So I think the work that is being done in this area can't be underestimated when it comes to assisting and empowering people. I think as long as we remain inquisitive and we challenge and check, this can be super helpful.
So let's just turning to the issue of trust. So you're talking there about like the good things and the bad things that are going on with this technology. So what can we do to create trust and balance out the risks of this emerging technology with the opportunities? How do we avoid something as bad as the post office scandal, but involving AI? I mean, that is one of the concerns that we've got. So let's turn to Bernd for that.
I think what's probably most central in both establishing trust that is deserved, so that where people trust something that they should trust, and also to generally address the broader question of technology ethics, is to ensure accountability. I think if you look at the history of technology in this country, but also in other jurisdictions, the tech industry, the computer science industry has been very good at evading accountability for a long time. When your car breaks, you can hold the producer or the seller accountable. When your software fails, that typically doesn't work. And that has a long history, and we could discuss for a long time why that's the way it is. But I think that has to change. And I think, to me, this really is a key aspect of dealing appropriately with technology in the future, is to make sure that people who cause something can be identified, and that has consequences that are appropriate and proportionate. I think that actually gels with Georgina's point. I think to me, this whole whistleblower debate is an aspect of accountability. It's sort of the trigger. Somebody has to say something that then leads to the attribution of accountability. But I think it can't stop there. I think it has to go beyond that. There then have to be processes whereby causalities can be identified and consequences can be created. So to me, accountability is the short answer to your question.
Well, one of the points that was raised in the report that you were the author of, all of you were the authors of, was about those policies about being accountable should apply to also non-technical leaders, including CEOs as well. How does that work? Because one of the issues we have in this like brave new world that we've got of technology is that those who are not technical don't necessarily understand what's happening with procurements, with the software that their companies are using. How can we help them understand?
I think partly there is an educational aspect that we need to make sure people do understand that there is a level of literacy around AI and digital technologies more broadly that will help people be able to assess the consequences of what they're doing. But I think more broadly, the point of holding senior leaders accountable is that if we don't do that, it's not going to lead to major change. So if the CEO of Google knows that they are going to be held accountable for somebody doing something with their technology, which they could have prevented from the perspective of having the power in the company to do things differently, then I think that may have significant impact, which if we keep them immune from consequences, will stifle any sort of development in that direction. And therefore, I think the accountability can't just be with the techies. We can't say this is just a technical issue that the technical specialist has to deal with. It's got to be a broader one. It's got to cover the organization as a whole, and that means senior management as well.
So I'll take also Gillian first, and then Adem. What are your viewpoints on how do we?
I'm with Ben that accountability at all levels is really, really important. We've seen this with the hospitals in the UK, where one consultant or one team has been problematic, but the executives in charge of the trust are the ones who bear the final responsibility for what goes on, and we can't let the CEOs of software companies or of companies who have developed and used software for finance or whatever business they're in. We can't let those CEOs be not accountable. You would expect them to be that, just because they don't have the technical ability doesn't mean that they wouldn't make someone else responsible within their team for ensuring that things are ethically sound, safe, okay for the public to use. So yeah, I'm certainly with the team on on making sure that all levels are accountable.
Adam, what's your view on this?
Again, pretty much agree on all the statements there. But yes, it's again, it's kind of if the CEOs or management aren't taking responsibility to that, then where does it really stop? It's you need that kind of view. And again, it's if there is something that's being done, and that gets like we always think of kind of like on our company side is if you're doing something that seems unethical and that was like released or published or someone gets ahead of that, it's kind of like what would that show to the company? So again, it's kind of like although it's you may be saying, oh, it's the techie person's job to kind of look at the ethics, but it has to go through the entire company because again, as once it goes out, it's not the individual that it's looking at, it's the company view. So it becomes like a company issue as in the sense here, it's kind of like it's shown for the whole of like Horizon, the whole of the post office. It's a view for all of them. And it's now put that kind of mark on them rather than kind of like, oh, it was the individual or team who initially built the application. So that there needs to be that kind of accountability and understanding through that. And again, it shouldn't be too difficult. Again, you may not know what the technical aspects are, but you'll still know what the like, is that ethically right or wrong kind of thing, and what you're doing, and know whether there's like, has there been enough testing done and things like that. So yeah.
Gillian wants to come back in as well.
Yeah, I just think, you know, we kind of dead focused on the AI debate, and I'm sure it was you, Bernd, who said, oh, AI, formerly known as software development. Was it you who said that? I'm very clear that this is not just about AI, it's about all aspects of technology and anything that we agree on, either within the UK or, you know, we watch what the EU are doing and we take some lessons from that. Anything that we agree on needs to not just be about AI. And I take the point that Beckett has made on the chat that, you know, we could go too far down one side of demonizing AI or too far down the side of saying that AI is the best thing since sliced bread. But we really need to be aware that there are some dubious individuals in the world who, despite knowing that there are dangers, will do things with the whole breadth of technology that are not in the public interest. And we need to ensure that whatever we do to regulate covers the whole breadth, not just AI. And that, you know, we're careful to protect people. And in this position, we can start to do that. We just need to get on, and we need to do it quickly.
So you're saying, Gillian, that this is across technology in general, but as the focus is so much on AI at the moment, all of you, how likely is a post office style scandal likely to involve AI? And let's go back to Gillian. What do you think about that? Do you think it's likely, or is it?
Yeah. We keep hearing about, or we've heard internally about different ways in which AI is being used innovatively, and it's fabulous. It's really, really good. But as it moves forwards, almost we know less and less about what's happening, and consequently, it's even harder to regulate. So I've no doubt it's going to happen again.
And what do you think about that? Do you think it's likely, unlikely?
I think it's inevitable, and it may already have happened. The point is not so much whether there will be such a future scandal and when it will happen. I think the question to me is how do we preempt possible consequences or reactions to it? And what to give you an analogy, so we want to make sure it doesn't happen. So we want to make it safe. Let's imagine you're a car designer. Now you want to design your car safely, and you want to do the best job you can possibly do. But at the same time, you know there will be accidents. No matter how safe the car is, there will be accidents. People will get hurt. People will get killed, probably, current state of technology. And I think we need to do the same thing with regards to AI, or I fully agree with Gillian, digital technology more broadly. So we need to put a lot of effort in making it as safe as possible to prevent misuse to prevent consequences, predictable consequences that we don't want. But at the same time, we need to think about what will we do when that happens, right? And going back to the automobile example, we have insurance schemes, we have a whole legal system around what we do, how we allocate responsibility and so on. And I think we need something similar for the digital technology. So we need to make sure it's as good as possible, but we also need to have ways of dealing with it when it goes wrong.
This leads on then to regulation, doesn't it? Because
regulation, I think, is part of it. I think it's a core part of it, which sets a lot of the framework. But there are lots of other things. There are standardization. There are other types of rules. There's professionalism. I mean, this is, after all, a professional body that plays an important role. So I think that there's a whole array of options that we need to look at. And the interesting point is, how do we get them to work together? How do we make sure that there's synergies and that they overall lead us to have a use and consequences of technology that are desirable and beneficial?
Let's have a quick focus then on professionalism. What do you think should happen as far as professionalism is concerned in this area, and not just this area, going back towards what Gillian was saying, across technology in general? Why is it important?
At the CIPD, if you're in HR, you will have a CIPD qualification that almost proves that you've reached a standard. And the accountants have the same kind of qualification. We have CITP, but we're a younger organization than the accountants are. I think that CITP could be a way in which we say to people, look, this person is actually ethically sound, technically capable, and that you would look for CITP on someone's CV. And, if it wasn't there, then you might. Now, we had a discussion formally about elitism, and I'm a bit wary of elitism as well. So just because you don't have a qualification doesn't mean to say you're entirely competent. However, it would be a really good way of saying this person can be trusted. And if we've got a sound enough code of conduct, code of ethics that people with the CITP sign up to, then all of a sudden you're starting to get a message out about the need to be ethically sound, the need to be competent within an individual, but also you're getting that same message out to the employer to say you have some ethically sound employees and you have some competent employees. And then the last part of it, coming to Georgina, is if you then have a proper whistleblowing facility or understanding or set of rules or processes within your organization, then as a CEO, that accountability gets easier, doesn't it? Because somebody is saying things are not going right, and it doesn't have to have got even to an external point. The whistleblower can be saying, my team manager is not listening when I say that something is dubious here. So, this is a really powerful, it's like audits. People see audits as scary, and they shouldn't. They should see them as valuable ways in which you reflect on whether you're doing the right things.
Do you think
Sorry, that was loads.
No, I just think it's interesting. I was thinking, should we have like companies have an annual ethics report that they have to do, like a survey that they have to do with their members, and just to assess whether or not they are adhering to ethical standards. And how would you do that? I mean, would it just be a tick box exercise, or how would you actually assess ethics? It's slightly esoteric, I know, but I just thought I'd throw it out
Georgina's desperate.
Yeah. I think this sort of lending ourselves to, let's send out a survey. I think there are much more sophisticated ways and simpler ways of doing it where people don't feel obliged as part of our performance management framework. But everything we're talking about here is leadership, and having our leaders going out and being in touch with their staff. They don't need to know exactly what buttons are pressed and who's pressing, they do need to know who's pressing them because they're paying them. But surely we're talking about the sophistication and the advantage that technology gives us. There've got to be better ways than surveys that can be mapped and processed back to being spied on, so people feel they have to say the right thing. And may I pick up a couple of the other points that have come through this? This is about leadership. It's the one word we haven't used so far. And everything that we've put in, all of the work that's gone into the whistleblowing bill is about how do we set some standards that don't inhibit business, but help it to grow, to help it feel safe in its own shoes, to be able to progress and share its learning? And yes, it does have 4 pillars. The first one, we talked earlier about, protecting people being afraid to speak up. This is the safe harbour for people who don't feel they've been listened to internally. But the bill is really about driving good, positive behaviour. That's the objective. It isn't about punishing people. But then taking on the points that Bernd has made as well about accountability, and you, Gillian, accountability. Leadership is about being accountable, or you shouldn't be in that job. And this bill will hold people to account. It will be there to ultimately improve the tone at the top because of the intention. It'll be about driving curiosity and driving that need for people to take responsibility for their sector, to drive up those professional expectations. And you're the best people to develop your regulations, not don't leave it to Parliament. Goodness, I think we've all seen how badly that can end. But with this accountability, but there's also a friendly side to the Office of the Whistleblower, which is about education. It's about setting minimum standards. So you're not starting with a blank piece of paper. These are things that are already established as good ways to do things, the right kind of policies, what good procedures look like, and what reporting platforms will help you. So personally, I think that we can normalise speaking up by improving our leadership and ensuring that when things go wrong, we're not afraid of them. A bit like the audit. I take your point, Gillian. Audits are so important, but let's do them openly, transparently, and let's share the good news with people and thank them for coming forward. So we're looking at recognition. I think the future is bright looking at the conversation we're having.
And can I just say that I think so quite a lot of this is about humility. It's the big thing, and it's emotional intelligence in a leader not feeling that they're being personally challenged by something like someone saying this is not working, it's not being done the right way, this is dangerous. They should feel that that's a useful suggestion and dissociate it from their personal state. And this, if we could change anything, it might be that our leaders start to do more self-analysis in that area.
But you're smiling as you're nodding along to that. What's your point of view on this?
Again, I agree quite a lot with this. In the terms of kind of like the professional kind of like standards and everything else, again, you may not get it if you've gone like initially when you've studied, you may have not thought I was going to go into an IT profession or somewhere along those lines, and you didn't decide to get all those qualifications or things, or you never got the start up for it. But that doesn't stop your organization from giving you that training. They can put you on these courses, they can send you to these places, you can get those accreditations, and then you are now a qualified person within your company.
We've got a new course at the BCS, which they've just let us try out. We're trialing it. We're guinea pigs, and it's all about ethics, and it's really important. There are lots of people. We were talking about elitism, as I said earlier, and there are lots of people who don't have degrees. They don't have computing as their background. They didn't get any special qualifications, so they won't have those ethical principles necessarily. They might be living it, but it's nice to know that they actually can do it. So that's why we've put together this course, which is all about ethics, and you get a certificate at the end of it. When I finally pass it, I haven't taken the exam yet. I can't fail, can I? But yes, when I finally pass it, I'm going to stick it on LinkedIn because I think it's really important that we stand up and say, yeah, I do know this stuff. I do understand.
Just out of idle curiosity, while you were doing it, did you sort of think, oh yeah, that's really made me think again about something? I know sometimes when I've done like a GDPR course, for instance, suddenly go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Does it make you sort of think twice?
I was surprised. I thought I'd know, and I was surprised how much it had me thinking. So I haven't finished it yet, Claire.
That's okay, but it is interesting, isn't it? So what are
Mm.
ethics? Who sets the ethics? How do you assess them? Is always quite an interesting thought. I mean, how optimistic are all of you that ethics and accountability, competent IT professionals will become standard in industry? Let's start off with Bernd.
I'm fairly optimistic, and the reason for that is the importance of the topic area. It is pretty undeniable that IT changes our lives in all sorts of ways. We realize that now. I mean, we have been able to realize it for a while, but the AI debate at the moment highlights that. And I think societies will go down the route of saying, yes, we now understand this is important and we need to be able to trust the people who do it. And that means there has to be some sort of professional recognition. I think it will happen for the same reason that medicine and law and accountancy all became professions, because people recognize these things are important. They need to be regulated, and there needs to be somebody who oversees what's happening. And in the same way, I think IT has gone down that route. Maybe it look a bit different, but I think professionalism is almost unavoidable at this point.
Anybody else like to chip in?
Yeah, pretty much agree. Again, I think it'd go down the same route, kind of like, for example, ESG, where there's now kind of more environmental policy, more things, people trying to actually, even companies just trying to show themselves as they're environmentally friendly, all these kind of sides to it. I think it would go down the kind of same route where you would have that kind of, but on an ethical side, kind of like a company and individuals showing that they are an ethical user, an ethical worker, and that would bring it more about within the wider industry, I would hope.
I'm going to bring in some questions now. Dan, are you ready to read out some questions?
I am indeed. Peter Otieno, I don't know if you want to ask. You put a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to come online and ask that, or not. You're more than welcome to. So you've unmuted yourself. Hello. Okay, maybe not. Peter says, I think the other issue would be learning from issues like the post office example. How can a case study be built around this to share widely on an iterative approach as opposed to a fast approach, as Adam has said? There has to be a deliberate knowledge management approach as opposed to organizations working in silos.
Yes, I think one of the key things that came to mind, especially around accountability, was the fact that you know, most people sometimes when something goes wrong, the immediate instinct is to kind of hide whatever has gone wrong. So it would be also looking at a more proactive way in sharing mistakes that have happened across multiple organizations to just ensure that we have a deliberate knowledge management approach. And this will help other people from replicating the same mistake that has occurred and actually improve on the way AI would be able to work across governments and organizations.
I mean, I love that. I don't know if anybody else wants to. I'm stepping away, Claire, because I'm coming back into my routine. So you take over.
So, anybody else like to respond to that? Have we surprised you all by that?
I think that's a great idea, and you know, the KTNs that are a product of the innovation funding bodies. It's exactly that thing. I don't know how we would make that fit across the whole industry, but it's a really good idea. And you know, if you don't mind, we'll take that away and go think about how we do that.
Great. Beckett Leclerc, do you want...
Georgina wanted to come in, and I was hoping she would, because I was thinking back to our conversation last week.
Well, I think we can learn from other industries, the health services, and however much you criticise it, it is really trying to bring in and embrace a learn, not learn, not blame culture. Now, I think that the technology sector is probably in a better position to be able to bring that in, because you haven't had quite so many catastrophes that we know of, at least yet. And I take what Peter's saying here, because again, I think we have to accept that human nature is, we do want to not be held accountable. You know, we're afraid of the embarrassment of getting it wrong. So promoting and encouraging speaking up in regular environments, so that people get over that, the hang-ups about speaking up, is only something you can do with within your industry, and actually have sessions within team meetings when you talk about things that didn't go the way you thought they were going to go. If you start it gently, as we've seen with some of the health groups we've worked with, you can actually quite quickly build up really great team spirit, and then sharing. And we always learn more when things go wrong, which is the bottom line, as somebody fundamentally comes from a learning background.
There was another point here raised by Beckett Leclerc, saying one of the key issues is that there are people on either side of the debate that have vested interest in skewing people's perceptions of AI being either all good or all bad, leaving a requirement for critical thinking that the general public doesn't always have time for. What do you think about that? Just going back to what you were saying before about education. I mean, and also Georgina. I mean, because this is quite a new field in some way, although also an old field, because ethics always is. Is there a problem with the general public not having time for critical thinking?
I think I would start with the first part of the comment, saying that there are special interests that try to skew the debate in a particular way. And I fully agree with that. I think that's true. And I think that's easy to observe. There are, for example, big tech companies who want to try to get away with as little regulation as they can, and therefore they make a very optimistic scenario or project ideas about technology that are very positive. Certainly, there are also people on the other side. Now, how to deal with that? I don't think there's an easy answer to that. Is there a lack of criticality in the general public? Well, we're all part of the general public, aren't we? So there certainly are people who are more or less critical. I think this whole topic area is being debated quite critically and quite prominently. So I don't think that's generally true. I think the question is more, how can we make sure that critical and reflected positions do get promoted, do get the hearing that they deserve, and also then do get translated into regulation, practices, professionalism, and so on. So I think, to me, that's the critical question. I think activities like this one are part of the answer. So we need to have this debate. We need to have it publicly. We need to engage with stakeholders. And only that way, I think we can develop our own thinking, our own awareness, and also spread it more broadly.
Georgina, we again, going back to our pre-chat, you were making the statement. You said, I'm no good at technology, I don't understand it, and then proceeded to understand it. Do you think there is an element of that we think, oh, it's tech, we don't really know it, we don't, this whole imposter syndrome of I don't really know what I'm doing, and then actually you realize you know more about it than you think you do?
You're right, and you did catch me out. I was just trying to escape and get somebody else to take the lead on this, but you're absolutely right. None of us can say we don't know about tech, in the same way that we all can bake a cake or do other things if we get the book out and do a bit of research. I don't think it is that difficult to learn the basics, and ethics is more than about tech. Ethics is about everything that we do. And in reality, we shouldn't need laws or regulations. We should all be acting that way. But when we look at Horizon and what's gone on there, I've spoken to a large number of whistleblowers from one of the technology companies involved. And some of them went to the lengths of using voice disguising technology because they were so afraid of the consequences of speaking up. You look at what's happened with crypto. Lots of people thought this was a quick scheme. It didn't turn out to be quite that. And I know nothing about it, but I said, it seems like pyramid selling to me. And I have to say, I feel like I was quite right in some of this. So throwing me in at the deep end with this, Claire, you're quite right. It has made me think, and I think it's important to recognise that there are many other people out there who get this stuff. But coming back to legislation, because obviously I want to promote what we're doing, I'm grateful that the BCS are very supportive of the work that we're doing around developing new legislation in the Whistleblowing Act. But this will help you because it sets that framework. And as humans, we do quite like frameworks, and most people are really decent and work within them. And it gives you something then to hang your hats on professionally, whether you're the leader of that organisation or whether you are somebody who is in a programming technical role. So personally, I'm not too worried about vested interests. I think that they can actually help because they drive competitiveness, they drive innovation. We just have to be mindful of them. And if we're all talking normally, it's called out anyway.
So we're coming up to the last few minutes of our lovely webinar, which has been great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you want some more questions in, we haven't got much time, but if
Got
you
a couple of questions.
Great, okay. Do you want to
Come
read them out, Dan?
Yeah, but just to say, I think we really do need to put a pin in that idea of deliberate knowledge management, because I think it's the role for organisation, and this is one of the questions we used to always ask actually at a policy jam, was what can the BCS do and what can civil society do, and there is a real role for professional bodies to be doing some of that. So that'll be a separate thing in the report. We're approaching a general election at some point, so one of the questions is, what do you as individuals or organisations want to see political parties to commit to in their manifestos ahead of the general election, to try and drive some of the changes that we've been talking about?
Who wants to start that one off then? Let's start with Adem.
I'm going to do it quickly. The
Okay.
whistleblowing bill. That's the only thing I want to see.
Yeah, clear regulation, clear and understandable regulation. I think a lot of the time it's kind of feels like we're almost going around in circles, or there's sometimes it feels like lip service, but there needs to be some clear guidelines for people and industry to understand kind of what we need to be doing. EU's been very good at the moment, where they've got their whole AI guidelines and everything else out there. There's something there for people to kind of, and industries and businesses to actually look at that. Whereas I think we need something similar, or taking pretty much most of what that is.
Do you think there's a danger with that, though, because the EU has quite a sort of defined framework, more so than we have here? Do you think we are unlikely to adopt it because the EU's got it? Is there a danger of that, as opposed to?
I think this is that humility thing again. You know, we need to understand that they've got some work done on it, and that we can share with that as long as they let us. You know, and this is yeah, it's maddening. But I also think, you know, we managed to regulate a huge financial industry with the Financial Conduct Authority, and they're all disparate players, and they're all out there to make profit, and we don't stop them doing that. We just make sure that everybody's protected. And I do think that there could be a role for a similar kind of organization which looks at the breadth of technology, from whistleblowing and ethical software development right through to online harms and everything that technology stands for. And I'll probably be unpopular for saying it, but I do think it's an important part of the future. We need that, and it takes that framework, Georgina, to that larger level. And if the FCA can be successful in doing that, then I think we need something similar for technology.
Yeah, we did get that through the whistleblowing bill, where we've put in there the provision for the development of an independent office of the whistleblower. And that's not about being all things to all men, but it's setting standards that can easily be adopted by each of the regulators.
Yeah.
You know, we've met with and spoken with and had a lot of support from the FCA and other regulators, because everybody gets that these ethical issues, these dilemmas, fall between the cracks of many different organisations. And by harmonising it through an independent office of the whistleblower means it can develop using the knowledge that comes through technology to bring forward the case studies. I'm trying to tick a few of the boxes of comments that have come out and ensure that we don't lose opportunities. So I'm very encouraged by everything everyone's been saying this morning.
We probably haven't got enough time to go into this whole idea about how strong the legislation and the regulation should be, but maybe in 30 seconds, which is going to be pretty difficult to do, but I'll give it a go. Bernd, let's turn to you. I mean, BCS itself has a pro-innovation approach to regulation of AI. What do you think will happen in future? I mean, it's an evolving, emerging technology even now.
Yes, if I knew the future, I probably wouldn't be here. But I think just coming back to the point I tried to make earlier is, to me, the key is that of creating accountability. And I think what Gillian has said, what Georgina has said, creating a regulator, creating a regulation, creating institutions are all part of that. And if I had a 30-second message to the political parties going up to the next election, I would say do whatever helps you establish accountability in a reasonable and appropriate manner.
So let's turn to Adam. What's your message then to the politicians?
So again, it's that regulation, it's that accountability, it's listening to kind of the industry as well. I'd say taking advice from professional bodies to kind of like what they should be doing, what they're at, because again, sometimes it can the government's response can be a little bit slow. And it can take a little bit of time for them to gather that information or push those laws through. So getting that relevant advice and professional advice, I think would be a very good side to it as well.
So as we come to the last few minutes, is there anything else you would like to add to this debate as we wind up now? What are your final closing comments? Let's go to Georgina first.
Well, I'll be quick. I agree with you. I think accountability is really key to getting these things right, and the Office of the Whistleblower and the legislation we're proposing actually builds that in, and it has a point at clause 5 looking at fines, penalties and sanctions. But I'd rather go right back to the beginning and say the message to our politicians is we want to bring forward legislation that drives positive behaviour.
Gillian.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at what Adrian was sending out. You know, we've got to move fast. The technology moves. We all kind of constantly say, "Oh, the technology moves faster than I can keep up with it." We need to move fast on this legislation thing. The EU are getting there. We need to be getting there too. We need to bring it all together. And wrap in things like, the knowledge management suggestions, and we just need to get cracking.
And resource the regulators, Gillian, resourcing the regulators.
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to be asking for that from the next government, yeah, I guess so. But yeah, let's get on with it. Pragmatic.
So Adam and then Bernd, and then we'll wrap up.
Again, pretty much same side with agreeing with everyone else. We just need that kind of regulation in place and that kind of sharing of knowledge.
And Bernd, finally.
So we've heard several times the use of the concept of pro-innovation approach, and Adrian has just shared that with us as well, the current government's pro-innovation approach to AI. And what that I think implies is a contrary to, so you have innovation here and you have regulation there, and if you regulate, it's not pro-innovation. And I think what we need to overcome is that position, a pro-innovation approach will very much be one that regulates, that legislates, that clarifies standards and principles. So my final words would be, let's embrace that. Let's make sure that we get technology to move in the direction we want it to move. But also let's realize that that will require significant intervention from all sorts of players, including the government, including professional bodies, also civil society.
Great. So that's the end. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming along. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have too, and to everyone that has tuned in. Thank you for listening and for your comments. That's the end of another Policy Jam.